Some children cry. Some laugh. But she did neither. She only stared, unblinking, unreadable, and far too quiet for a 7-year-old. The moment she whispered my name, everything I believed about love, loss, and fate came undone. My name is Oliver Hartley. I'm 31, a children's book illustrator living alone in a quiet stone cottage in the Yorkshire Dales. The sort of place people romanticize but rarely visit. It rains often, the kettle's always on, and life is slow, until it isn't. I wasn't looking for change or for people. And then, one rainy night, they left her at my doorstep. A silent child. A girl with wide eyes and secrets tucked beneath her stillness. This is not just a story about a child. It's about what she brought with her. And who I became because of it. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in my bones. Morning broke with pale light and frost clinging to the windows. I found Clara in the garden, barefoot again, whispering to the tree. "Clara?" I asked softly. She turned to me slowly. "You drew me before." What? "You did. When you were small." I didn't know what to say. I could barely breathe. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me something. A folded piece of paper. Torn at the edges. It was a drawing. My style. My handwriting. Clara, age 8, oak tree. I staggered backward. This was my sketch. From when I was a child. I remembered it like a distant dream, drawing a girl I'd imagined sitting under that tree. But I had never met her. At least I didn't think I had. My hands trembled. "This isn't possible." Clara just smiled again. As if the world was moving exactly the way it was meant to. I drove into the village that afternoon. Asked around. Showed the photograph of the 1940s girl. Old Mrs. Langley at the bakery paused when she saw it. "Well, that's little Clara Donahue. Lived up on the hill during the war. Sweet girl. Went missing one day. Never found. Some say she wandered off into the woods and got lost. Did anyone live in that cottage after?" She squinted. "A few over the years. But not for long. Said it always felt too quiet." I didn't press further. Back home, I found Clara sitting at my desk, flipping through my sketchbook. "Do you remember the woods?" I asked her. She looked up. "They forgot me." "Who?" She touched her chest. "My voice. That's where it stayed." It made no sense, yet every part of me wanted to believe her. That night I had a dream. The kind that feels like memory. I was a boy again, sitting beneath the oak tree. A girl beside me. Claire. She was laughing carefree. Drawing flowers in the dirt with a stick. "I'll wait for you," she whispered. I woke with tears on my cheeks. And the fire crackling beside me. Clara wasn't on the couch. I panicked. Ran through the cottage. Then outside. My breath fogged in the cold night air. She was there, standing beneath the oak tree looking up at the stars. "You came back," she said without turning. "I didn't know I'd been here before. You were lonely. Just like me." I walked to her slowly. "Who left you here? Who were those people?" She turned to me, voice steady now. "They didn't know me. Not really. I followed them. Until I found you." "Clara, what are you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward and placed a small hand over my heart. "I'm the part you left behind." Then she hugged me. A tight, long, warm embrace. And I felt it. A memory, deep and aching, of a summer long ago, a promise under a tree, and a girl who had waited through time for someone to remember. I didn't sleep that night. I just held her hand and watched the fire burn down. In the morning, she said something before I could ask another question. "I don't have much time." "What do you mean?" "I came to say goodbye. But not yet. I wanted to feel something again." "You can stay." "I want you to stay." She smiled. "You're ready now. To feel everything you locked away." And then she drew one last thing, a picture of me and her sitting under the oak tree. And behind us, a woman holding a camera. The woman was Eliza. I didn't recognize her fully yet. But I would. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever had a moment with someone that felt like fate caught up with memory. The days that followed were quieter, but not in the comforting way I was used to. My cottage had always been a sanctuary of silence. Crackling fires, rustling sketch paper, birdsong in the morning. But now the quiet felt conscious. Like it was listening. Clara spoke only once more that week. "I want to stay longer," she said, clutching the hem of her dress as she sat by the window. "But I don't belong here." She said it like a truth she had accepted long ago, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready. Her presence had cracked open something in me, memories that weren't memories, feelings that had no origin. The girl who once stood in a black and white photograph was sitting at my breakfast table, dipping toast into her tea like any ordinary child. Only nothing about Clara was ordinary. I contacted the authorities again. Local police. Social services. Even an old university friend who worked in child psychology. I described her. Gave them a physical description, mentioned the strange behavior, even confessed how she'd arrived. Every conversation ended the same. We'll look into it. But no one came. No one called back. It was as if Clara didn't exist on paper, in databases, or in any of the systems designed to find lost children. I considered going to London or Leeds, somewhere larger, more equipped. But every time I packed a bag, Clara would sit on the stairs and whisper, "They won't find me. I only came for you." How do you argue with that? One morning, I found her in the attic, sitting cross-legged among the old boxes I hadn't touched in years. She was flipping through one of my childhood sketchbooks. "You used to draw happier things," she said. I blinked. "I didn't know you could read." She looked up. "I read feelings." I sat down beside her. The floor creaked under our weight. She turned the page. "This one," she pointed. "You drew this when your mum left." It was a scribbled mess of dark lines and a crumbling house. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. But she leaned her head against my shoulder. And for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past as something to run from. That afternoon, I received a visit. A knock, 2 taps. Nothing like the frantic knock from that stormy night. At the door stood a woman with chestnut hair, half tucked into a gray scarf. Mid-30s. Green eyes. Holding an umbrella dripping with soft rain. "Sorry to intrude," she said. "I'm Eliza Bramwell. I was told by Mrs. Langley that you were asking about an old photo." "Of Clara Donahue?" My breath caught. "Yes," I managed. "Come in." We sat in the lounge. Clara was in the studio drawing. I offered tea. Eliza spoke slowly, carefully. My gran was Clara's older sister. She passed away a few years ago, but she used to talk about Clara as if she'd come back someday. Like she'd never truly left. "Do you believe that?" I asked. Eliza hesitated. "I'm a historian by trade. I believe in facts. But I felt things. Seen things. Especially since my gran died. And when I saw your sketch online, the one of the girl under the oak tree, I just knew." "You saw that online?" She smiled softly. "It's gone a bit viral on local heritage forums. Someone shared it without your name. People are calling it the ghost of Hartley Cottage." I sighed. "Great. But that's why I came. Because I think Clara's story isn't finished." I glanced toward the studio. "She's here." Eliza froze. "What?" "She's alive. She eats, draws, talks sometimes. But she's not normal." Eliza leaned forward. "Can I see her?" Before I could respond, Clara entered the room, quiet as mist. Eliza gasped. The teacup in her hand trembled. "She's the same," she whispered. "Exactly the same. From the photograph in Gran's locket." Clara walked up to her. Looked her in the eyes. "You forgot me," she said simply. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. "I was only a baby when you disappeared. I didn't know." Clara took her hand. "But you remembered enough to find me." Over the next few days, Eliza visited often. She brought old letters, photographs, records. We pieced together a partial history of Clara's life. A life that had ended abruptly in 1944 when she vanished during an air raid evacuation. Except she hadn't vanished. She had stayed. Or something had. And now she was here. Eliza and I began to fall into rhythm. She'd bring history, I'd bring stories. We'd sit late into the night beside the fire, talking about lost time, unfinished lives, and things we weren't taught to believe. I started drawing again, not just sketches but full illustrations. A children's book began to take shape. A tale of a silent girl in a rainy village who waits for the boy who once drew her. Clara, meanwhile, was changing. She smiled more. She laughed once when Eliza spilled tea all over my sketches. And she began to hum lullabies I didn't recognize but somehow knew. But one evening changed everything. We were sitting by the fireplace. Eliza was reading one of the letters aloud, something Clara's sister had written in 1952, long after hope had faded. "I sometimes feel her still. In the trees. In the wind. Like she's waiting." Clara turned to Eliza and said, "You always knew where to find me." Then she looked at me. "You were always drawing me. Even before you knew who I was." I couldn't respond. Emotion caught in my throat. She stood, kissed Eliza on the cheek, then climbed into the loft where she liked to sleep. Eliza touched her face, stunned. It felt like, I don't know, like warmth, Like closure. She's changing, I whispered. She's becoming real. Eliza shook her head. Maybe she always was. Later that night, after Eliza had gone, I heard Clara whispering in her sleep. I climbed up to the loft, careful not to wake her. She was curled in a blanket, murmuring words I couldn't understand. Then suddenly, "I'll be gone by the next moon." My chest tightened. "No," I whispered. "Stay." She opened her eyes. "I came to heal what was broken." "And what was broken?" "You," she said. "I don't know what Clara is. A ghost. A memory. A piece of time stitched into the now. But I do know this. She changed everything. Eliza and I have grown closer, drawn by grief maybe, but held together by wonder. And Clara? She taught me that love is not bound by time. That silence can speak louder than any word. And that some promises echo across lifetimes. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever felt like someone found you just when you needed to be remembered. Clara began drawing more rapidly in the following days. Her pictures became less eerie and more human. Faces, fields, animals. She even drew one of Eliza and me sitting at the kitchen table, laughing over tea. There was warmth in every line. But she also grew quieter. Each day she seemed a little more distant, a little more transparent. Not physically but emotionally. As if she was pulling back. Eliza noticed too. "She's saying goodbye," she said one night after Clara had gone to bed early. Not out of sadness, but because she finally feels seen. I nodded, throat tight. "And what happens when she's gone?" Eliza reached across the table and took my hand. "We carry her forward." It was simple and true. On the 7th evening since Eliza arrived, Clara came downstairs holding a small yellowed envelope. Her fingers were smudged with graphite. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. The envelope was addressed in a looping hand. "To the boy who drew me back." Inside was a note. I waited. I whispered into the wind. Sat under trees that remembered. Drew paths that curved toward you. You came back. So I could leave. I looked up, but she had already turned away. That night, Eliza and I sat in silence as the fire burned low. No words were needed. Clara was gone by morning. No sound. No goodbye. Just her final drawing left on the studio desk. A child releasing a red balloon into a twilight sky. We buried the drawing beneath the oak tree. And we wept. Weeks have passed since then. Eliza moved into the cottage not long after. We filled it with books, sketches, tea mugs, and long walks. Some days we still feel Clara's presence. A giggle in the breeze, the scent of lavender on the windowsill. The children's book is nearly done. It's called The Silent Girl of Summer Hollow. We wrote it for Clara. But really we wrote it for anyone who's ever waited to be remembered. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever held on to something invisible that once made you feel seen. It had been 3 weeks since Clara vanished from our lives. Vanished, that's the only word I can use. She didn't die. There was no funeral. No physical absence we could wrap our grief around. She was simply gone. Like smoke after a fire. Like a song that fades mid-melody, leaving you humming the rest because you can't bear the silence. Eliza and I tried to keep life moving, filling the space she left behind with routines. The kettle still whistled every morning. The fire still popped inside. And yet, it was impossible not to feel her echo. Some evenings, Eliza would stop mid-sentence, glance at the window and whisper, "Did you hear that?" We both knew what she meant. It wasn't the wind. It was the quiet Clara had left behind, a quiet that still knew our names. The book was nearly finished. The Silent Girl of Summer Hollow had become more than just a tribute, it was a promise. Every page was painted with warmth, golden fields, wistful skies, 2 figures sitting under an oak tree, and a silent girl holding the world in her eyes. But my sketches had started to change again. One morning I flipped through my latest sketchbook and found something I hadn't drawn. A single page. Clara, not the one we knew but older. Maybe 12. Maybe 15. She was standing by the oak tree, hair longer, face more defined, eyes still watching. Beneath it, in my own handwriting, though I never wrote it, were 4 words. "She isn't finished yet." I didn't tell Eliza at first. What could I say? That the girl we'd buried in memory was still sketching in the dark? It wasn't just the drawings. Objects began to move in the cottage. Small at first. A pencil left in a place I swore I hadn't used, a teacup shifted 2 inches off the saucer, the radio tuning itself to Clara's favorite classical station. One night, I found her red ribbon, the one she'd worn the day she disappeared, tied around the handle of my studio door. I called Eliza immediately. She didn't hesitate. "We're going back to the oak tree," she said. It was near dusk when we returned to the tree. The field was quiet. The breeze slow. The same stillness that had always surrounded it, but tonight, it felt loaded, almost expectant. We stood together, Eliza and I, hands clasped as the shadows lengthened. "Clara," she whispered, "if you're still here, we're listening." Silence. And then, a sudden gust of wind that spun around us like a breath. Leaves scattered in spirals. A low hum rose from the tree, not from the branches or the ground but from within it. And then, something fluttered down. A paper. A drawing. We watched it float to the earth like a leaf. I picked it up with shaking hands. It showed the cottage but not how it looked now. It was older, more worn, the chimney half broken, the garden wild and overgrown. And standing in front of it, Clara. Holding the hand of a woman I didn't recognize. Eliza knelt beside me, her eyes wide. That's my Gran. We stared at the image, chilled. Clara had drawn the past, a memory she'd never shared before. Over the next few days the drawings kept coming. They'd appear each morning, left neatly on the kitchen table or beside the fireplace. Images from times long gone. Clara sitting in a classroom, hiding during an air raid, hugging a dog that looked suspiciously like the stray that used to visit our cottage. They weren't just memories. They were breadcrumbs. She was leading us somewhere. One morning I found a drawing of the attic. In it, a trapdoor but not the one I knew. This one was smaller, tucked behind a beam. I climbed up immediately, heart pounding, and searched every corner. And there it was, a false panel in the floor hidden under a loose board. Inside, a tin box, rusted but intact. I opened it slowly. Inside were letters, dozens of them. All addressed to Clara. All unsigned. I read them one by one. Each a small act of love. Childhood secrets, promises, poems. They were from her sister, Eliza's Gran, written over the course of her entire life, even after Clara had vanished. She never stopped writing, Eliza whispered beside me. She never stopped hoping. Tears burned in my eyes. Clara stayed because she was still being called. That night I sat in the studio alone, sketching. I drew Clara once more, this time standing at the edge of the woods, looking back over her shoulder, smiling. I didn't feel haunted. I felt held. Then I heard it, a soft whisper like breath through leaves. "Thank you." Just one word. But it filled every room in my heart. Eliza came into the room, wrapped in her shawl. "She's ready now," she said. "So are we." I nodded. "Do you think she left again?" Eliza shook her head. "No. She's part of us now. In the roots, in the house, in the ink of your pen." We stood together in the doorway of the studio. I reached for her hand. "Let's finish her story," I said. And we did. The official launch of our book was held at the village hall. We didn't expect much, just some locals, maybe a reporter from the Yorkshire Chronicle. But word had spread. Teachers, historians, families with quiet children. They all came. They wanted to know about the silent girl who had waited beneath an oak tree. The room was filled with warm light, steaming flasks of tea, the quiet hush of reverence. Eliza stood at the podium, reading a passage about remembrance. I watched her with a full heart. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't mention ghosts or drawings that appeared out of nowhere. I spoke about memory, about silence, about how some stories wait decades to be told, and how some children speak without ever saying a word. I ended by pointing to a framed drawing we had placed on the table. Clara, smiling, one foot lifted like she was about to step forward into a world that had finally seen her. "She taught us to listen," I said, "to what isn't said." Later that night, back at the cottage, we lit a candle by the oak tree. It flickered against the wind but stayed lit. Eliza laid one of her Gran's letters at the roots, sealed with the red ribbon Clara had once worn. The wind picked up again, not strong but gentle, like fingers brushing past. And we heard it. Not a voice, but laughter. Distant, high, and full of life. We didn't speak. We just held hands and smiled. Weeks turned to months. Summer drifted into autumn. The book was well received, picked up by a small publisher in York. We were invited to talk on radio shows, podcasts, even interviewed for a BBC segment about folklore and lost histories. But we knew Clara's story was more than folklore. It was the truth. Eliza and I spent our evenings by the fire, reading letters, working on our next book. This one a collection of real village legends. The cottage felt fuller now. Not with people but with peace. Sometimes I still draw Clara. Not out of habit. Out of love. One morning I found another drawing on the kitchen table. Simple. A tree. A balloon. and a single word beneath it. Stay. I took it to Eliza. She smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then we stay. And so we did. In the cottage where time folded in on itself. In the home where silence once lived. And love never left. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever felt that some goodbyes are just beginnings in disguise. Eliza kept the photograph on her bedside table now, the one Clara had drawn of her and her grandmother standing in front of the old cottage. Every time I looked at it, I was struck by the precision, the way Clara had captured not just likeness but emotion. The quiet tension in her grandmother's hand. The protective curve of her arm around Clara's shoulders. She never talked much about her childhood, Eliza said one morning, tracing the edge of the frame. Said the memories were too heavy. We were sitting on the window seat, the sun not quite up, a chill still trapped in the stones of the cottage. The kettle had yet to boil. She felt guilty, I guessed. Eliza nodded. She was 10 years older than Clara. They were supposed to leave together that day. But her school bus came first. She always believed Clara stayed behind to wait for her. And never left. She never forgave herself. Even as an old woman. And maybe Clara never forgave her either. We sat in silence, the air between us full of ghosts. Then Eliza reached into a drawer and pulled out a parcel, bound in twine, fragile with age. I found this in my grand's trunk last night. I thought I'd gone through everything, but somehow this slipped past. She handed it to me. Inside was a series of sketches. Drawings that looked eerily like mine. Same style. Same soft edges. Same shading technique. But they weren't mine. These are hers. I asked. Eliza nodded. My gran was an illustrator too once, before she became a historian. I flipped through them carefully. Sketches of two girls under an oak tree. A picnic blanket. Paper crowns. Rain boots. A dog with a stick in its mouth. She remembered, I whispered. Every detail was intimate, not imagined but lived. I think she kept drawing Clara. Even after she stopped speaking about her. She couldn't say it out loud, Eliza said. So she said it with ink. That afternoon, we drove to Harrowby, the small village where Eliza's grandmother had grown up. It had taken weeks to trace down names, letters, and records. But what pushed us forward was a detail Clara had drawn in the most recent sketch. A brass key hanging from a red ribbon, looped around an iron fence post. When we arrived, the village was quiet. Rows of stone cottages nestled against sloping fields, all warmed by the same late autumn light. I haven't been here since I was 10, Eliza said, stepping out of the car. But it feels like stepping into a memory. We found the churchyard first. Small. Overgrown. And there it was. The key. Exactly as Clara had drawn it. Hanging from a rusted post, where an iron gate had long since crumbled away. Eliza reached for it. Her fingers trembled. Attached to the key was a tag. Donahue, 1943. It unlocked a door at the back of the church. A storage room filled with old records, broken hymn boards, and musty books. In the far corner, a wooden chest cracked at the hinges. Inside, a locket. Some postcards. A child's shoe. A folded dress no bigger than a doll's. And a journal. Written in a looping hand. Clara's book. We sat on the stone steps outside the church and read each page slowly. Drawings. Scribbles. Half-thoughts. Sentences that broke your heart. Eliza is always busy. I don't mind. I watch the birds. Sometimes I think I'll disappear. Would anyone see me? I had a dream where someone was drawing me. I think I smiled. Eliza clutched the pages to her chest. She knew, she whispered. Even then. That night we stayed in a nearby inn. The wind pressed against the windows as we lay awake, listening. Neither of us spoke. Because something had shifted. Clara's story was no longer a mystery we were trying to solve. It was a life we had been asked to honor. Back home I started on a new sketch, a double portrait. Clara, age 8. Eliza's gran, age 18. Side by side. In the background, the cottage, the oak tree, the candlelight. As I worked, Eliza read aloud from the journal, her voice steady even when the words faltered. There was one line that stuck with us both. I think love is when someone remembers you even after you stop being loud. We hung that line above the mantel. Not as decoration, but as a promise. A few days later, Eliza received a letter from a London archivist. She'd submitted Clara's journal and our collection of drawings to a preservation fund that focused on lost children of war. They wanted to feature Clara's story in an exhibition. They're calling her a wartime spirit, Eliza said, reading the letter aloud. A lost voice remembered by art. She wouldn't like that, I muttered. No, she agreed. But she'd love that people are listening. We stood again under the oak tree the evening before the exhibition opened. Another drawing had appeared on the windowsill that morning. Clara, arms open, standing in a beam of sunlight. Behind her, children. Lots of them. Some holding hands. Some laughing. All silent. I think she's not alone anymore, I said. Eliza leaned her head on my shoulder. She never was. The exhibition was held in an old Victorian library in London. Paintings. Letters. Clara's original journal under glass. Eliza spoke to a small, attentive audience. I didn't speak this time. Instead, I wandered the room watching how people responded to her drawings. Some smiled. Some cried. One woman touched the frame of the oak tree sketch and whispered, "I had a sister too." And in that moment I realized, Clara wasn't just a girl who waited to be remembered. She was a mirror. Held up to all the quiet parts of us we'd forgotten how to love. Later, as we packed up for the evening, Eliza found one final envelope tucked behind the display board. No one had seen who left it. Inside was a small drawing. Clara standing next to a figure I didn't recognize, a girl maybe 13. Curly hair. Kind eyes. Beneath it, a note. Tell her she's ready now. I didn't know what it meant. But Eliza smiled like she did. She's passing it on, she said. The quiet. The healing. The remembering. And I knew then that Clara's story was never meant to stay with just us. It belonged to everyone who had ever been left behind in silence. We left London behind the next morning, the city already fading in the rearview mirror as the Yorkshire hills welcomed us back. I remember the way Eliza looked out the window on the drive, not sad, not nostalgic, but still settled. She's really gone, isn't she? I asked as we turned up the familiar lane. No, Eliza said softly. She just doesn't need to haunt anymore. That word, haunt, had shifted meaning for both of us. Clara hadn't haunted the cottage. She'd filled it, lifted it, and us. Now in her absence it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Late one winter night, as snow dusted the sill and the fire curled warmly in the grate, Eliza brought me something wrapped in an old linen cloth. I've been saving this, she said. Inside was a photograph, one I hadn't seen before. It was us. Me, Eliza, and Clara. Standing by the oak tree. But the photo was old. Yellowed. Weather-worn like something lost to time. Eliza, I whispered. We never took this. She shook her head. No. But someone did. We didn't frame it. We just placed it back in the linen cloth and returned it to the drawer. Some memories aren't for display. They're for keeping. The snow came early that winter. It dusted the hilltops and hedgerows with a softness that made everything feel suspended in time. Inside the cottage, the fire never stopped burning, and neither did our work. Eliza spent her days sifting through donated letters from families touched by Clara's story. I sat by the window, sketching in charcoal and ink, my fingers permanently smudged with memory. But something had shifted. Not between us. Not in a way that was spoken aloud. It was quieter than that. A space had formed. Not a gap, not a distance, but a waiting. A truth neither of us had voiced. Not yet. One night, I caught Eliza staring at the oak tree again. Her tea had gone cold in her hands. You've been quiet, I said gently. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained on the glass, on the white branches beyond. I keep thinking about Clara's last drawing, she said finally. The one with the other girl. The one we didn't recognize? She nodded. I think I do now. I turned toward her, surprised. Who? I think it's me, she whispered. Not as I was. Not even as I am. But who I'm meant to become. Who Clara wanted me to become. There was a silence, deep and full. Then I said, maybe she was showing you it's time to let something in. Eliza turned to me. Her eyes shimmered with the reflection of the fire. I don't want to let go of her. You don't have to, I said. You just have to make room. We didn't talk much for the rest of the evening, but something had been said. And it hung there between us, not heavy, not awkward. Just true. The next morning as I made breakfast, I found a note on the kitchen table. Gone to the village. Needed air and answers. I waited for her return, hours crawling like snow melting. She came back near dusk, cheeks flushed from the wind, eyes bright. What did you find? I asked. She reached into her coat and pulled out a letter, yellowed, handwritten. It was tucked inside the back of one of Gran's history books in the village archive. I unfolded it carefully. It wasn't addressed to anyone. To the one who finds this. If you're reading these words, then perhaps the story was never lost. Only waiting. I never stopped loving her. Not even when the world forgot her name. I pray someone somewhere draws her gently back into the light. It was signed only with a small initial. Eliza? I asked. She shook her head. No. Edith. My gran. I held the letter like something sacred. She never stopped trying to bring her back. She never could, Eliza said softly. But we did. That night we made dinner together, pasta, nothing fancy, but there was a different warmth in the kitchen. More laughter. More silence that didn't need to be filled. I watched her as she dried the plates, sleeves rolled up, a strand of hair falling into her eyes. And I realized something I'd known for months but never dared say. I was in love with her. Not because of Clara. Not because of grief. But because of how she carried it. Because of how she saw the world, broken and beautiful and worth remembering. I dried my hands on the towel and said it. Eliza, I love you. She paused. Looked at me. And in that pause the world held its breath. Then she smiled, slow, certain, and walked across the kitchen. I know, she said. I think I've been waiting for you to say it. And she kissed me. Softly. Without fear. Without ghosts between us. Later that night as we sat curled on the sofa, the fire warming our feet, I felt the hush settle again. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like a blanket pulled gently over our lives. Eliza leaned into me and whispered, "Do you think Clara knew?" She always knew. Pause. Then maybe she brought us together. I looked down at her, her fingers laced with mine. Or maybe she just reminded us how to feel. Outside, snow drifted past the windows. Inside, everything glowed. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever realized love was there all along, just waiting to be spoken. The first letter arrived 2 days after we said I love you. It came by post, tucked between utility bills and a faded furniture catalog. No return address. No name. Just a small, cream-colored envelope and on it, in careful script. To the one who kept drawing. I opened it slowly, expecting poetry, maybe a note of thanks from someone who had visited the exhibition. What I found was something else entirely. Inside were 3 folded sheets. Handwritten. In pencil. Delicate cursive, like someone unsure of the words even as they wrote them. I remember your name. I remember you drawing the girl with the balloon. I think I saw her once. Or maybe I was her. There was no signature. Just the date. 1947. I read it twice. 3 times. My pulse thumped in my ears. Eliza. I called. She came from the study, a stack of photo albums in hand. When she saw my face, she set them down gently. What is it? I handed her the letter. She read it in silence. Her lips moved slowly. Then she said what I had been thinking. This is real. We contacted the archivist in London, wondering if the letter might have been found during the exhibit and forwarded, but they had no record of it. More came over the following week. Each one handwritten. No return address. No name. Some were barely legible. Some poetic. Some rambling like thoughts unraveling. But they all mentioned her. Claire. A girl with curls and quietness. A girl people remembered but hadn't spoken of in decades. She used to hum. Always the same tune. Like the one you drew in the book. I thought I made her up. Until I saw her face in your story. She walked with me once when I was lost. I was 7. It was raining. Thank you for proving I wasn't mad. We kept them all. Tied each stack with ribbon and stored them in a wooden box on the mantel. Letters never sent, Eliza called them. Until now, I added. But one stood out from the rest. It arrived in a dark blue envelope. Tattered edges. No stamp. Inside only one sentence. I was the one who left her at your door. My hands trembled as I passed it to Eliza. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender. Like Clara's blanket. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the lounge, wrapped in wool, the fire low as snow pressed gently against the windows. Neither of us spoke. But in our silence, we both understood. This story was still writing itself. The next morning, I found a note pinned to the studio door. It wasn't a letter. It was a drawing. Claire. Sitting at the foot of the oak tree. In her lap, a stack of envelopes. Around her feet, petals, bluebells, poppies, daisies. Above her, the words. They wrote. I waited. I leaned against the doorframe, heart full, eyes burning. They found her, I whispered. They always had, Eliza said behind me. That evening we opened the box and read the letters aloud, one by one. Some were short. Others rambled. A few ended mid-sentence. But every voice mattered. And as we read, it felt like we were opening a window in the cottage. Letting air in. letting memory out. We cried. We laughed. We held hands through the pauses. By the end, the fire had burned down to ash and still we sat there. Until the silence itself felt like the last letter. One we'd finally delivered. Later, Eliza pressed one of the letters into a frame and hung it above Clara's final drawing. Read. Some people don't need to stay forever to be unforgettable. We stood together beneath it, arms around each other. I think she's at peace now, I said. Eliza nodded. Because she was never really alone. Subscribe, like, share, comment if you've ever carried someone in your heart longer than you realized. Spring came late to the Dales that year. The frost lingered longer than expected. The hills stayed gray and the trees held their buds like secrets. But even so, life stirred again. Lambs appeared in the fields. Daffodils pushed through hard earth. The silence that had blanketed the village all winter began to soften into birdsong. And something inside us was shifting too. The letters had slowed. Clara's drawings had stopped. The air in the cottage no longer carried that thin, uncanny weight, the sense of eyes watching, of pages turning themselves. It was quiet. Genuinely quiet. And for the first time in months it felt like that was okay. She's gone, Eliza said one morning, not with sorrow but certainty. I didn't ask how she knew. I just said, yes. We decided to visit the oak tree one last time. Properly. Not just to pass by or to stand beneath it in thought. This time we brought a basket, 2 folding chairs, a thermos of tea and a small wooden box, carved with Clara's name, her birth year, and the word she had used so many times in her drawings. Waited. The wind was gentle that day. Sunlight spilled like paint across the field. We sat in the shade, sipping tea, saying nothing. After a while, Eliza opened the box and pulled out a red ribbon. She wore this the day she first arrived. I smiled. She left it tied to the studio door. We wrapped it around the tree. Then we opened the rest of the box, a few sketches, one of her pencils, and a small folded note in her unmistakable hand. You remembered me. That's all I ever needed. We buried the box in a shallow patch beneath the roots. No headstone. No plaque. Just memory. And love. That night, I lit a candle and set it by the windowsill. The flame danced gently. Eliza watched me from across the room. You still miss her? Always, I said. But now it doesn't hurt. Eliza stood and crossed the room, wrapping her arms around my waist. She found her way home. And so did we. The next morning, the first poppy bloomed outside the cottage. Bright red. Delicate. Clara's favorite. We didn't need a sign, but there it was anyway. She wasn't haunting anymore. She was simply present, in memory, in meaning, in the way we'd grown. The weeks after were soft. We read. We painted. We talked about things beyond Clara, about future things. I've been thinking, Eliza said one night, about fostering. Maybe even adopting. I looked up from my sketchpad, heart rising. Are you sure? She nodded slowly. I think there's a child out there. Someone like Clara. Someone who needs this. She gestured around the room, not just at the space but the warmth inside it. We know how to love the quiet ones, she said. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Yes, I whispered. We really do. A few months later we met Lily. 6 years old. Soft-spoken. Wide-eyed. She didn't say much at first. But when we showed her the studio, the garden, and the oak tree, she walked straight to the tree, placed her palm on its bark, and whispered something we couldn't hear. Then she turned to us and smiled. That night, as she colored quietly in the lounge, she looked up and asked, "Who's the girl in the picture with the red balloon?" We glanced at each other. Eliza smiled. That's Clara. She used to live here? She did, I said. She still does, Lily said with a nod. Then she went back to coloring. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. We didn't need to say anything. We just listened. To the quiet. To the fire. To the home we'd built from memory and made new again with love. The cottage has changed over the years, not drastically, not visibly to most. But it's in the feeling. The way warmth settles into its corners now. The way the air carries laughter instead of echoes. And footsteps. Little ones. Lily fills this place with color and music and the quiet kind of magic that only a child can bring. Not unlike Clara once did, but different too. Clara had arrived like a question. Lily came as an answer. She doesn't ask about Clara much, though we keep her picture above the fireplace. A drawing of her beneath the oak tree, holding a red balloon. Lily sometimes stops and looks at it before bedtime. She's happy, isn't she? She asked one night as I tucked her in. She is, I told her. Because she knows we're looking after this place. After each other. Lily smiled, rolled over, and was asleep within minutes. Eliza joined me in the hall, her hand brushing mine. She's becoming hers too, she said softly. The children's book lives on shelves in libraries now. Not just in Yorkshire, but in schools in London, homes in Canada, and a tiny bookstore in Lisbon run by a woman who swears she once dreamed of Clara long before she ever knew her name. We receive letters. So, people thanking us. Sharing names. Stories. Memories. I had a sister who vanished. My son didn't speak until he was 9. Now he reads Clara's book every night. Your story reminded me I wasn't alone. We keep them all. Wrapped in ribbon. Bound by silence and gratitude. One day they'll be Lily's. She'll know Clara not as a ghost but as a thread, woven through generations. Last week, Eliza and I took Lily to the oak tree for the first time that season. She ran ahead of us, ribbon in hand, giggling through the tall grass. When we caught up, she tied it gently around one of the low branches. I told her thank you, Lily said. For the pictures. For waiting. I knelt beside her, pressing a kiss to her temple. She heard you, sweetheart. She always does. That night, as stars freckled the sky, I sat by the fire, sketching the three of us beneath that tree. Not for a book. Not for display. Just for us. In the drawing, Clara stands in the background. Not a ghost. Not a memory. Just a presence. Smiling. Content. Watching love grow. In the years since Clara arrived, and since she left, I've come to understand something I couldn't back then. Some people are not meant to stay forever. But they come to show you what forever means. They arrive quietly. Disrupt everything. Heal what was broken. And then gently they leave. But they leave you better. So if you find yourself in the quiet, if you feel a hush that feels like memory or love or something else entirely, don't be afraid. It might be someone remembering you. Or someone asking to be remembered. And if you feel something shift in your chest like an ache you didn't name, it might be the truth of the heart speaking softly. Love remains. Always. Subscribe, like, share, comment if this story touched a place in you that still remembers something soft, something sacred, something never forgotten.